Hi, I'm Susan, and today's video is foundation or paper piecing. I've got some tips, tricks, and techniques. If you'd like to stitch along, I've included a free pattern and supply list. So let's get started. So after I've printed each of my individual patterns, okay, I've got these all printed, and I use the papers for foundation piecing. This is a lighter weight paper. It makes it easier to remove from the back of your pattern when you're done. I like to work with this, and I'll show you a couple of tricks that I do with foundation or paper piecing. I really like this paper. I think you will too. So after I printed my pattern, I've cut the sections apart. I have section A, B, and C here. And then I've gone and I've collected or selected all of my different fabrics, and I've cut my individual pieces again according to the instructions. Once I've done that, I'm going to take my section A for this particular piece, and this has my section A, and all of them are numbered A1 through 9. And I'm going to start with A1, and that is going to be this very small section right here, and it is the handle. So I've taken one of my pieces of handle, and since I'm going to be working from the wrong side of my fabric, this is my stitching side, I'm actually going to be placing my fabric on the wrong side of the paper, and it's kind of hard to see. So what I've done is, by using my wafer, I'm able to place my individual piece directly over the section that I need covered with the fabric, like so. Okay, now my A2 is the one just above it, and that's a background piece. So here's my A2 section, and I'm going to go ahead and place that right sides together. Now if you want to pin this, you can, because like I said, you're going to be actually stitching on this side of your fabric. But I think you might be able to see here where I've got my dark outline that I'm going to be covered with my pattern piece, and I can see that my fabric completely covers over. Now I do notice here I have to get out here into, well actually no, the next piece will cover that. But once I get here, I'm now going to take it to my machine. You can see where I still have my fabrics aligned on the back. I can't see the lines on this side because I'm at the machine, but I can see the lines on the printed side, and that's where I'm going to be stitching. So I've chosen the line that's between A1 and A2, and I've taken my stitch length down to 1.8 instead of 2.4. And the foot that I'm using is a clear view foot that has a bar across the center front and a guide in front of my needle, so I can run that guide right along my seam line on my pattern. So we're just going to stitch again right along that seam line. Now I'm going to flip my fabric over. I'm going to open my seam, and I'm going to use my brayer to crease my seam so I have a nice crisp edge. Now I'm ready to go to step 2. So I'm going to flip it back over and see, aha, I need this other piece here of the handle. So we're going to flip it back. Now this piece is a little large, so I could go ahead and trim off some of that fabric, which I think I will. Get my scissors real quick. And I'm just going to trim off. I've given you sizes that were large enough so that you could accommodate everything and still have plenty of space. So in case you got something misaligned, you would still have the fabric you needed in order to create your pattern. So now I'm going to take my piece, make sure my edges are aligned properly. Come back over here and stitch on the lines between A2 and A3. Making sure I've got my fabric nice and flat. Okay. And we're just going to run that back through again. and stop. Flip it over, flip it out. Use my brayer again to get that nice crisp edge on my seam. So I've got that flat out. Okay, here is A4, which is the rest of my handle. So I'm going to select the piece that's the rest of my handle, and I'm going to put right sides together like so. I want to make sure, and I'm going to flip back over to my light box for just a minute. This is my wafer again. I want to make sure that when I'm laying out my fabric, I'm going to do a quick check to make sure I have enough fabric to go all the way to the edge of my pattern, and I do. So I don't need to go trim anything off of this. Everything works fine. So I am now ready to take this and go right back to my machine. And again, we're working from the right side of the pattern. And we're just going to line that up and stitch right through on that seam line. What I like about doing foundation or paper piecing is the fact that it's very relaxing. I don't have to worry about, okay, which piece goes next or whatever, and making sure that I get exactly perfect 1/4 inch seams or anything like that, because I'm stitching the seam line as I'm building. So I don't need to worry about the pattern not coming out correct, not getting the exact 1/4 inch seam. And we press that on, and we just continue to build all the way through our complete pattern. I now take it to my machine. Again, I'm stitching between A5 and A4. And start from your outside seam allowance all the way through to your other seam allowance up here at the top. Okay, so I've got that seam allowance done. I wanted to show you one more step here. It isn't just finalizing. When you go to the small corners to finish off the handles, I've given you a larger piece of background because, as you can see, as I'm looking through here, I can see that I've got a seam allowance that's going to go through, but I have to extend out here to the seam allowances here. So for that reason, I want to make sure I'm covering this completely. So an extra large piece, and the light box or the wafer allows me to see the fabric, so my placement is correct. I'm finished with this. If I flip this over, you can see I'm going to have a lot of layers of fabric here on the corner. And if I just leave that all, that's going to get kind of thick and heavy right there. What I wanted to show you was how to use your add a quarter ruler. Now to do this, I'm going to take this back over here, and I'm going to flip my paper and fold it on that seam line. Extend my 1/4 inch, because this has a lip on the edge of it. It's going to fit right against where I folded that paper, and I can now go through and use my rotary cutter and cut off the extra fabric, leaving exactly a 1/4 inch seam. Now when I flip my fabric back over, I don't have that added bulk. So I've got my handle all pieced and ready to go. And now what I want to do is do the actual mug. Now I've fussy cutted mine. So I'm going to, again, right sides together, place my fabric over top of my pattern, okay, my handle. And if I need to double check it, I can go back to the back side, flip it over, align it correctly, take it to the machine, and we're just going to go ahead and sew this into place. Make sure you come to your full seam allowance. And there we go. Okay. And we're just going to stitch this seam. Go back over here and flip it over. making sure I extend into my final sheet. I want to make sure I have enough fabric over there. I'm a little shy, but it's going to work. My brayer again, get that nice and flat. And you can see where my mug is kind of coming together a little bit here. Okay, the last piece we have is this section over here. Again, we want to make sure we've covered, and I'm going to be past my stitching line, and I can see where that's going to work. I've gone past my stitching line here. Make that a little straighter. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to trim off my extra fabric here after doing my stitching using my add a quarter ruler. And I've run into a situation here where this line is not a 45-degree angle. So how am I going to get this piece to cover that completely on the right side? Well, after trimming off my extra fabric on that same line, because I folded back on that seam line right there, I'm now going to take my fabric piece that I want to use. In other words, it's going to be right sides together, but I'm going to make sure I cover my entire area here. I'm going to flip it around, fold it back on this line, okay, and I'm going to just do another line using my blue marker and just draw a line like so. That's going to give me the same angle that I can go ahead and do my stitching on. So now I'm going to take it to my machine after I've done this. Okay, there I can see my blue line. You may not be able to see it, but I know where it's going to be stationed here, and I'm just going to try this out. I've got it going the wrong way. It's going to go like so, 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to fold it on that line and verify that it covers my area, and it does. So that's how you're going to do an angle that doesn't quite do a 45. It's simply going to trace the line onto the fabric, then flip it around and do your stitching. Now I've done my stitching, but before I trim the extra fabric away here, I just want to verify by folding my fabric over that I'm going to completely cover my outline area, and I do. So now that I've got that completed, I'm going to fold everything back away from my seam like so. So only thing I have is the extra fabric. I don't want the fabric I just stitched on there out front. I just want this on. So I'm going to go ahead and add my 1/4 inch ruler, trim off my extra, and now I've got my piece that's going to lay perfectly flat for me, so I can go ahead and use my brayer, and I've got that whole section covered. So if you don't have a 45-degree angle, that's what you're going to do first. You're going to fold it on the line, trace the line onto your piece of fabric, flip the fabric over, align the line, seam line to where it's going to be stitched, verify that it's going to cover your area, and then do your seam. Let's finish this piece up. So I've just stitched the last piece of my fabric onto my pattern piece. Now I didn't get exactly 1/4 inch on all of it, but I got most of it there. So I'm going to fold back my paper along that seam line, use my add a 1/4 ruler. Remember, I haven't opened my seam out, so I'm only trimming off the extra, not the piece I just stitched on. Okay, there's my pattern piece. Open my fabric piece to make sure I've covered everything, and it works. Do my brayer, and now I'm ready to trim off the little pieces on the side. I actually have a small ruler that I like for doing this, and I've added the handle to it. So now to cut this correctly, I'm going to make sure I'm working from the paper side with the printing on it, and I'm just going to align my ruler with the printed lines to get it all nice and straight. I like having the little rotary cutters around too. It makes it very convenient for doing small projects like this when you don't need the larger ones, and I can keep everything right at my machine. Like so, and like so, and my piece is now ready to go onto the rest of my pattern. If you'd like to see more videos like this on garment construction, serger techniques, and things you can do with your digital cutter, please subscribe.
I wanted to include my favorite recipe for doing chai latte at home. And it's probably things you already have around your house if you drink tea, so you should be all set for that. Just a couple of things extra that you might need to have in place. It only takes a couple of minutes, but you're going to need a 15-ounce cup for a 12-ounce mug. I've already put my tea bag into my tea maker right here, but you can use a French vanilla tea bag or a chai tea latte or chai tea bag. Either one will work. And while that's heating up, I'm going to go over and use my frother, and I'm going to add in Coffee Mate French vanilla creamer. You can use any flavor that you like. Now, Coffee Mate is less than 25 calories and less than 1 carb per cup, so anybody can drink this. Now I'm going to cover that little bitty spring at the bottom of the frother. You can kind of hard to see at this angle that I have the camera, but you're going to do that, and then you're going to place it back on its stand, and you're going to use the heat setting. It has 2 hot or cold settings, either one, but when you're doing hot tea, you want to use the hot setting so you don't cool your tea off when you're making it. While that's doing that, I can just flip that closed. Now we're going to go ahead and do this. It takes very, very little time, maybe 60 seconds to do it. You can do more than 1 mug at a time. The frother will hold more than enough for 1 mug. You can do any flavor that you like. So if you like peppermint mocha or something like that added to your tea, or any kind of tea. It doesn't have to be a chai latte. It can be any kind of a latte. And you can do it in coffee as well. So this is a great way to go, but I wanted to include this. Now the only other thing I do add is a couple of packets of stevia sweetener to my mug, and I already put that into the bottom before the hot tea went in, so it's already gone and dissolved. Now you want to make sure you have room left at the top of your mug. Pour in enough of the creamer that you want, and like I said, you sometimes have more than enough for 2, and then sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on the very top. Now you can get real creative and cut a shape out for a stencil with your digital cutter if you want to make it super fancy for a special treat. But that's my recipe for doing chai latte at home.
Once you've got all your stitching done on all your pieces, go ahead and press them with a dry iron. Do not use steam. And then I'm going to trim away the extra fabric from the back side. In other words, my fabric is going to be underneath my paper. So I've got the paper side up, and I'm going to trim away along the pattern edge and remove all the extra fabric and paper. Now I'm ready to stitch all my pieces together. So I'm going to layer B on top of A, right sides together, and again I'm going to follow my stitching line all the way through. Get that lined up properly. And you can see how it's going to come together. Here's another tip that I found very handy. Now I want to remove the paper from the back of this square, but I don't want to be pulling against the stitching because I'll probably end up pulling it out. So if I take a Q-tip, dip it into water, and I'm just going to run it right along that seam allowance. That's the other nice thing about this paper for foundation piecing is it's going to make that pull directly off just as easy as it can be. So it's going to lift it up completely from my pattern. I'm not going to be pulling against my seam. Allow it to soak in just a little bit and it pulls right away. Very easy. Another great tip. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly go around all my seam allowances with my Q-tip dipped in water, and then pull the rest of my paper away. Now with all the paper gone, I have my block ready to finish. Be sure to click that subscribe button below so you don't miss my next video. And remember, it's only wrong if it doesn't work.